Hello guys, Bingocat here. So today's video, I will be comparing operating systems once again, but today instead of comparing different Windows versions, I'm going to compare the latest version of Windows, Windows 10 Pro 64-bit Anniversary Update Edition, versus the latest version of macOS formerly known as OS X, so macOS 10.12 Sierra. Now I decided to do this instead of Windows videos so you guys can truly see what using Windows versus using Mac is like. So I have Windows 10 Pro 64-bit running in VMware here, and I also have macOS 10.12 Sierra also running in VMware here, and I gave them pretty much the exact same specifications. The only thing I gave that is different is a hard disk drive size. I don't know why this turned out to be 79 gigabytes instead of 80 gigabytes. I think I typed in a little teeny tiny number wrong. But yeah, anyways, so the minimum system requirements to run Windows 10 is a 1 gigahertz or faster processor, 2 gigabytes of RAM or more, and hard disk space of 16 gigabytes for the 32-bit version of Windows 10, or 20 gigabytes for the 64-bit version of Windows 10. And the graphics card required is a DirectX 9 or later graphics card with a WDDM 1.0 driver, and a display of 800 by 600 resolution. So, Macs, on the other hand, are a little bit different with their system requirements. Macs don't really go by, those numbers that I just read aloud to you guys. Instead it goes sort of by model year, because you can only technically install macOS on macOS devices. It's a little bit easier to determine the system requirements because Apple provides a handy dandy list on their website of all the Macs that can run the latest version of macOS. So macOS Sierra has all sorts of Macs you can run it on. iMac is late 2009 or newer, MacBook late 2009 or newer, MacBook Pro mid-2010 or newer, MacBook Air late 2010 or newer, Mac Mini mid-2010 or newer, or Mac Pro mid-2010 or newer. And so, in order to actually get your old computer to run macOS, Apple doesn't make it easy. So if you still have a computer out there that's for some reason is running Mac OS 10.6, I think that's Snow Leopard. It's not easy the last time I checked the upgrade to macOS 10.12. First you have to update to 10.7, and then to 10.8, and then to 10.9, and then to 10.10, and then to 10.11. Well, if you bought a computer in like 2009, there's a chance that it's already running Windows 7, and Microsoft luckily made it extremely easy to upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10. You just run basically an installer file that you download from Microsoft or you get off a DVD, and the wizard pretty much guides you through the Windows 10 installation process. It usually takes an hour under, where macOS you would spend hours and hours and hours upgrading to the latest version of macOS. So yeah, technically, by the way, I don't think you're really supposed to run macOS in VMware. Apple actually supports running it in VMware, but you're only supposed to run it in VMware for testing purposes only. So disclaimer, you can find macOS 10.12 files in the internet to download to run in VMware, but you're only supposed to use it for testing purposes. Like, I don't use this for anything personal. I just downloaded this specifically for the intention of this video. Now, I actually have a MacBook, but it would have been a pain, honestly, to make a video using my MacBook and this computer. So yeah, let's go ahead and turn both virtual machines on. Alright. Oh, the Windows 10 window is kind of glitching out there for a minute. Alright, so both virtual machines are booting up. I don't know why the Windows 10 virtual machine has such a weird looking window, but we can always resize it. So as you guys can see, Windows 10 won the boot race. The macOS 10.12 operating system is still booting up, and it's still booting up. We'll be back when it boots up. Alright guys, so macOS 10.12 has finally came to the login screen. I assure you it does not take this long on physical Macintosh computers. It actually had just booted up to the login screen, but then I tried to resize the VMware window, and I guess the virtual machine didn't like that, because the virtual machine all of a sudden black screened right here. And so I had to restart the Mac operating system. But yeah, let's go ahead and log into both operating systems. And let me type in my super secret passcode. And I guess, hang on, there we go. So I should be able to resize the operating system now without it black screening. Yep, there we go. But once again, Mac OS hasn't really been optimized for VMware, and so I do have these scroll bars here. So I'm actually gonna reposition this, so I guess Windows 10, the VM's just a little bit smaller, and the Mac OS one is a little bit bigger. But yes, so this is the desktop of Windows 10, and then this is the desktop of Mac OS 10.12 Sierra. Now, the Windows 10 wallpaper, this is called the Hero wallpaper. And fun fact, this was not created in Photoshop. This was actually a photograph taken in a studio. That's right, this is studio lighting going what looks like maybe it's projecting through glass or something like that. I don't know, but this is a real picture. This wasn't just photoshopped. Now the macOS Sierra default background is, you guessed it, a picture of the Sierra Nevada. And so macOS Sierra was actually named after the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. And for those of you who don't know, the last few versions of macOS that they've released have been named after Californian landmarks. Before they did that, they were naming their operating systems OS 10.5 Leopard or OS 10.7 Lion. They were sort of nicknaming their operating systems after big cats. Starting with OS 10.9 Mavericks, they started naming it after Californian landmarks, probably because they were running out of big cat names. And so yeah, Windows 10, honestly the naming behind Windows 10 really doesn't make that much sense, considering how the previous name of Windows 10 was, well, before Windows 10, the previous version of Windows was Windows 8.1. And so there have been many theories flying around on the internet on why Windows 10 is called Windows 10 and why it's not called Windows 9. But my favorite theory is that apparently programs run for Windows 95 and Windows 98, they would have thrown a huge fit in Windows 10 because developers back then, in order to identify which version of Windows it was supposed to run on, just called it Windows 9. And so if they named Windows 10 Windows 9, there would be all sorts of program incompatibilities. And so in order to simplify this matter, they just called it Windows 10. And then of course, you know, there's a marketing explanation of it, that they wanted to call it Windows 10 because this is supposed to be the ultimate version of Windows. This is supposed to be the last version of Windows. This is supposed to be the version of Windows that runs on all of your devices, your phone, your tablet, your desktop PC, your laptop PC, etc. So yeah, moving on. So the interfaces of both operating systems, you guys, well, they're different. Most of you guys by now, even if you aren't kind of geeky like me, have definitely probably used both a Windows computer and a Mac computer. You guys might have not owned both types of computers like I have, but you've probably definitely at least seen the difference between Windows and Mac. So at the core functionality, both operating systems are really similar. They both revolve around their GUI, or graphical user interface. And what this means is, instead of using something like, let's say, a command line, like command prompt, for example, to do things on the computer, they have like these nice little windows you can move around and icons you can move around. And, you know, it's basically, you don't ever really have to interface with the command line if you don't want to. And so that is pretty much the entire core aspect of Windows and macOS. So Windows down at the bottom, the main way you interact with Windows, I guess, is called the Taskbar. From the Taskbar, you can launch programs like the File Manager, aka Windows Explorer, or you can launch your internet browser. And if you want to find more programs to launch, Windows has its famous Start menu, where all the apps in Windows are listed in one place, or are usually listed in one place. Sometimes they aren't, but most of the times, if you have an app or program installed on Windows, it will be listed here. And of course, you got this nice little search box here, so you can search for pretty much anything you want. You can search for, let's say, Google. And thanks to the Cortana assistant, it can search the web for information about Google. It can suggest stuff for you like Google Maps. It can search all the documents you have on your computer. It can search for a program, like if you have Google Chrome installed, it will search for that. And this search is actually pretty useful. I'm not a big fan of how Microsoft is pushing the Bing search engine in Cortana, but hey, it's a built-in search engine that searches the web in your operating system. And honestly, I think that's pretty cool. Oh, by the way, speaking of Cortana, Windows 10 has its own built-in virtual assistant called Cortana. And Cortana, basically the entire goal around here is to make using the computer a lot easier. What Cortana will do is it will scan, or some people might call it spy, on like your emails and your files and, you know, interests you might like on the internet, and try and provide you helpful suggestions like when you should leave for work, or it can tell you what's the traffic like on the way to work, you know, etc. So yeah, let's move on over to the basic macOS 10.12 Sierra interface. On macOS 10.12 Sierra, the interface is a little bit different than it is on Windows. So, like on Windows, you also get spawned to a desktop, but Mac doesn't have a taskbar, if you may notice. Instead, it has something called a dock. Now, Windows, starting with Windows 7, the taskbar started to behave a little bit more like Mac's dock. And how the dock works is that it can hold shortcuts to programs that you choose, or it will hold programs that you have that are open. And so the Windows taskbar actually kind of works like this nowadays. It has since Windows 7. You can pin your most frequently used programs down here, or your favorite programs, and just open them with a click of a button. And that's basically the exact same way that Mac's dock works. So if you want to launch applications in a macOS 10.12 Sierra, there are several ways to do it, like in Windows. So macOS 10.12 Sierra doesn't have a start menu per se like Windows does. The Windows start menu is sort of meant as a one-stop control center for your computer. Like if you want to do something on your computer, you stop here first, and you can pretty much accomplish most tasks that you want to do. So Mac, on the other hand, it's sort of split up a little bit. First of all, you have a menu up here that you can get to where you can access the App Store, System Preferences, your recent items, and then the sleep restart shutdown commands and the logout of the account commands. And then up here, you have your notification center, where you can get notified of all sorts of stuff, like, you know, what's going on your calendar, your stocks, your weather. You can customize this notification center however you want it. Windows 10, starting with the original build of Windows 10, has its own built-in notification center. Windows 8.1 didn't really have this, and honestly, it's pretty nice. Both notification centers are really fairly similar how they work. So yeah, once again, the launch applications and macOS 10.12, we have a nice search bar here, which macOS 10.12 does come with Siri. It is the first version of macOS that actually has Siri integrated. And it pretty much works the exact same way as it does on iPhone. You can ask Siri all sorts of questions. And macOS, like Windows 10, is able to provide you, you know, like helpful info whenever you need it, like what's the traffic on the way to work, or how long is your commute going to be to work, or something like that. But the other way to launch applications on macOS is called the Launchpad. And the Launchpad looks extremely like the home screen on iOS. As you can see, I really only have the bare minimum apps installed at the current moment. But you can also search for apps up here, like if you wanted to search for, I don't know, FaceTime, voila, you get FaceTime right there. So the built-in versions of each OS's file manager. The main difference between File Explorer and Finder here is Windows has this address bar here where you can manually punch in the location of a file. macOS doesn't really have that. It does have an option to go to a specific folder. You can enter in your path right here, but it isn't always sitting there like it is in Windows. Both File Explorer and Finder are really customizable, and for the most part are easy to access. Both sort of have a favorite section. In Windows, it's called Quick Access, and Finder, macOS Sierra's Finder, it's called Favorites. Windows 10 comes with a built-in web browser called Microsoft Edge. Now, Microsoft Edge was built to replace Internet Explorer, and so Microsoft Edge is actually only included in Windows 10. So macOS 10.12 comes with the latest and greatest version of Safari. So let me go ahead and open up both web browsers just so you guys can see what they look like. At its core, they're both really good internet browsers. They're plenty speedy. Both support, albeit limited, extensions. And both web browsers should be able to get the job done for you, or should be able to download you Google Chrome or Firefox. Now, as far as downloading programs or apps to both operating systems. What is the difference between programs and apps anyways? So Windows 10 actually comes with its now built-in App Store. This existed in Windows 8, but you couldn't run any windowed applications in it. The applications were full screen by default, but it comes with its own built-in App Store called Store. And if you take a look at the top apps here, they offer stuff like Facebook, Messenger, Media Player, Adobe Photoshop Express. And so macOS 10.12 also comes with its own built-in App Store, and it is appropriately called App Store. And let's just take a look at its top chart here. It's like GarageBand, Flappy Golf 2, Slack, Remote Desktop. And so Microsoft is positioning the Windows Store as the main place you're going to download applications for your computer. And Apple is positioning the Mac App Store as the main place you're going to download applications for your computers. Traditionally on computers, you either A, installed applications from a CD or a floppy, or you download applications from the internet. Starting in 2011, Apple brought their App Store to the computer from the iOS line. I mean, it's a separate App Store than the iOS line, but starting in 2011, Apple started toying with the idea of including App Store in their operating system. And so Microsoft, seeing the success of Apple, starting with Windows 8, also included an App Store in its operating system. Now, I've noticed in some of the comments for my videos, I notice a lot of people don't like the idea of an App Store in their PC. And once again, I ask, why not? One of the benefits of App Stores is that the apps that you're downloading are pretty much guaranteed not to have any form of malware, because last time I checked, the apps and publishers are screened by Microsoft and Apple respectively. So it's virtually almost impossible to get malware from either place. And the other awesome thing about an App Store is that everything is updated in all one place. With a traditional program like Adobe Flash, for example, it has its own built-in updater, or either that or you're going to have to go to the internet and manually download updates yourself. And honestly, who has time for that? Who wants to do that? With the goal with the App Store, on the other hand, is that all updates come in one place, and so it is easy to keep your computer up to date. Now, of course, you can still install programs on both operating systems the traditional way, aka installing it off of like a CD or downloading it from the internet. So, antivirus. So Windows comes with its own built-in antivirus called Windows Defender. macOS comes with nothing, but arguably it doesn't need to come with any built-in antivirus. I personally install antivirus on my Macs anyways. You can do whatever you want, but the macOS operating system market share is so much lower than Windows still that you arguably do not need one. And just the way macOS works in general is supposedly more secure than Windows. Like, for example, if you try to do any administrative task on Mac when you're logged in as an administrative account, it will ask you for a password. On Windows, it doesn't do that. It just gives you a yes or no option to click, and you could click yes or no. Just simple things like that are probably why Windows is just a teeny tiny bit more unsecure than macOS. But yeah, Windows comes with its own built-in antivirus program called Windows Defender. It works fantastically. It's definitely not the best antivirus program. In fact, it's probably one of the worst antivirus programs. But hey, it's better than nothing, right? Especially on Windows, which still has like 90% of the desktop operating system market share. Let's look at cloud storage on both operating systems. So macOS comes with something called iCloud and iCloud Drive. And the goal with iCloud Drive is that you can easily access your files anywhere. Like, you have photos you take on your iPhone, no problem. You can access them on Mac. Or you save a Word document on Mac to iCloud Drive, no problem. I can view it on my iPad later while I'm on the go. And so Windows also has something like this called OneDrive, and OneDrive pretty much works the exact same way as iCloud Drive. And with cloud storage, basically, the goal is to make your files accessible from wherever you are in the entire world. Now, quite a few people don't like cloud storage solutions because they're concerned about the privacy issues of them, or that, they might be more vulnerable to hacking or something like that. I personally use cloud storage and like cloud storage because honestly, to me, the convenience outweighs the privacy and hacking concerns. To me, this is my own personal opinion, but I just love the idea of OneDrive and iCloud Drive. And honestly, I think both Apple and Microsoft implemented their systems fantastically. So let's take a look at the built-in programs of both operating systems. So Windows, it comes with a ton of stuff by default. A lot of this stuff is new. A lot of this stuff never existed in Windows 8 and especially Windows 7. So Windows comes with like 3D Builder where I guess you can build like 3D models. I don't know, I've never really used it to be honest. And then it comes with an alarms app, then calculator, calendar, camera. It comes with games such as Candy Crush. It also comes with the Get Office app to help you get Microsoft Office, or the Get Started app, which is sort of just a guide to Windows 10. Then it comes with its own built-in mail app, maps app, messaging app, Solitaire. Then it comes with Microsoft Money, movies, news. A lot of this stuff is sort of kind of new to Windows 8 and Windows 10, to be honest. Like sports, for example, that didn't exist in Windows 7 in any way or fashion, and neither did weather, and definitely not Twitter. Twitter didn't used to be included in Windows at all. And so a lot of people don't like a lot of these built-in apps because they think that it's bloatware. Yeah, and as far as these apps up here, of course, there's some older Windows applications included with Windows, like Paint, Windows Fax and Scan. And you know, Windows Fax and Scan is kind of weird how they still include that because there is an actual modern scanning app, so I'm sort of surprised they still include this. And same thing with Windows Media Player. There's a modern videos app, so I don't understand why they really keep Windows Media Player around, but who am I the judge? And then you have your administrative tools down here, and then accessibility tools, and then PowerShell, and then the command prompt, the control panel. And I mentioned this in every single one of my Windows 10 videos, but Windows 10 pretty much has two places where you can configure settings: the control panel and the settings app. And I've already droned on and on and on in my other videos of why I hate having two places for settings, but I don't like having two places for settings because it's confusing to the end user. But at least Microsoft they are getting all the settings in the control panel and eventually putting them in the Windows settings app. And Windows settings has gone so much better since the first time I used it. Like, they actually have a search box here, for example. I don't think they used to have that in Windows settings. On another thing that's sort of interesting that I'm going to point out about Windows is Windows now has the ability to run a Linux bash shell. And honestly, that's kind of awesome. I don't really understand why you'd necessarily need to run a bash shell in Windows, right? But, I mean, kudos to Microsoft for including it. It's cool. It's pretty cool if I want to do some sort of Linux terminal command, and I can actually do it in Windows without having to set up my own virtual machine. So Mac, on the other hand, comes with built-in apps like iBooks, Messages, Mission Control, Photos, Photo Booth. It even comes with games like chess. And if you go into the Utilities folder, this is sort of the system administration tools for macOS. Now, something I've always liked about macOS over Windows is Mac has its own built-in PDF reader and built-in creation tool, and Microsoft finally has both in Windows 10, but it's nowhere near as nice as Preview. Preview is basically like a full-fledged PDF program. It isn't super bloaty like Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader is. It's quick and lightweight. Yeah, that was basically the gist of both operating systems. I want to say that both operating systems really are not that different nowadays. It used to be the main thing that would drive a person to one operating system or another back when they were first becoming popular was price, and that still is a major factor, and whether a program was available for Windows or Mac. Like, for example, if you really wanted to use Internet Explorer, that's only available for Windows, right? Or if you really wanted to use, let's say, Apple GarageBand, that's only available for Mac. So Even though it used to be a lot more programs were available for only one or the other operating system, nowadays the most major programs for both operating systems run on both operating systems. You want to run Google Chrome, you can run it on Windows and macOS. You want to run Adobe Photoshop, you can run it on Windows and macOS. You want to run Microsoft Office even, you can run that on Windows and macOS. Or what about the iCloud Drive? You can also run that on Windows and macOS. OneDrive, Windows and macOS. iTunes, Windows and macOS. Both operating systems really are not that different user interface wise. If you can use Windows, you can definitely use Mac in my opinion. Both are extremely easy to navigate. So yeah, that was a basic comparison of Windows 10 versus macOS 10.12 Sierra. I'm going to go ahead and shut down both operating systems. So yeah, that's the end of my Windows 10 Pro versus macOS 10.12 Sierra operating systems comparison. If you like this video, please like it. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. That would mean the world to me. So yeah, bye guys.